Ancient Greeks and Romans got a surprising number of things correct about the spread of disease. Let's remember, in Greece specifically, every 10 years or so they had a plague. And let's remember why a lot of Greek temples, not only ancient Greek temples, but Egyptian, even the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, and the temples, of course, and buildings in Rome, had columns. And from what we read in one of the past articles, they informed us that these columns were to bring up the Earth's magnetic forces into the columns, and the people that would be passing through the openings of the columns or even leaning on the columns, the outside series and the inner series of columns, would be receiving the benefit of the Earth's magnetic forces and somehow bringing the humans' bodies' equilibrium, making them healthier. That was their theory. Now, this is by conversation. Barbara Zipser, Senior Lecturer History of Ancient Medicine, Science and Technology at Royal Holloway University of London. From packed train carriages to busy shopping centres, being crammed together is often poorly ventilated spaces had become so normal that it's taken us a long time to get used to social distancing. But our ancient ancestors were much more used to using airflow and space to guard against disease. That's why, of course, these temples were, for the most part, open air, as you can see. So, airflow. Kindly support my Patreon account since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. So they were used to using airflow. Ancient ancestors were much more used to using the airflow in space to guard against disease. Indeed, ancient Greek and Roman doctors got a surprising number of things right in this sense, even if the thinking behind their remedies was very far from what we know about how disease spreads today. Ancient Mediterranean societies had a developed understanding of the importance of airflow for public health. Public buildings and entire cities were designed in a way that minimized stagnant air. In this sense, we could learn a thing or two from the ancients as the pandemic encourages people to rethink how we design towns and buildings to help limit the spread of infectious diseases. These ancient designs were based on 4 qualities: hot, cold, wet, and dry. These qualities were thought to correspond to 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black and yellow bile, and to 4 elements: air, water, fire, and earth, all of which were believed to influence the body and its emotions as well. The Roman author, architect, and civil engineer Marcus Vitruvius Pollio, commonly known as Vitruvius, described the importance of airflow in his work on architecture. He advises building a city on an elevated point that is temperate and not near a swamp. He is wary that a morning breeze could displace damp air and mosquitoes from the swamp to a city, which would in turn cause, in modern terms, infectious diseases. Okay? So you should be away from swamps. How many people live near swamps today? Or things that are somehow not swamps, but estuaries that have been filled in. And we do have a lot of mosquitoes and swamp insects there. So he says that this damp air would cause infectious diseases. You see, so he was right. The dry air would be better. Vitruvius goes on to say that the same principles apply to building theaters. He describes how a lack of airflow can be a problem in such enclosed spaces and how prolonged exposure to hot, stagnant air can cause disease. He said, when the sun shines full upon the rounded part of it, the air, being shut up in the curved enclosure and unable to circulate, stays there and becomes heated, and getting glowing hot, it burns up, dries out, and impairs the fluid of the human body. Today, the 4 humors concept has been superseded by modern medicine, We now know Vitruvius's above explanation for how fevers originate to be incorrect, but we will still use some of the related terminology today. For example, when we talk about the common cold or describe someone as hot-tempered or humorous, and the four qualities of hot, cold, wet, and dry are still relevant when thinking about our health and the environments we live in. Perhaps the most famous and influential set of ancient medical ideas is to be found in a collection of Greek texts known as the Hippocratic Corpus, named after the 5th century father of Western medicine, Hippocrates. The way the Hippocratic texts arrive at conclusions is not always correct from our modern point of view, but that does not mean that they're always wrong. One of the texts, called Airs, Waters, Places, presents a detailed analysis of airflow and humidity and its influence on seasonal peaks of infectious diseases. As the text explains, a 5th century BC doctor taking up a post in a new town would, first of all, familiarize themselves with the local geography and weather, as well as the typical endemic diseases. Quote, as time and the year passes, he will be able to tell what epidemic diseases will attack the city, either in summer or in winter, as well as those peculiar to the individual which are likely to occur through change in mode of life, end quote. Today, modern medical theory has shown how climate can affect the spread of infections, potentially including COVID-19. This is particularly important information in an age of rapid climate change. It's also important for doctors to be aware of what diseases are prevalent in their areas. For instance, tick-borne encephalitis is rare in most of Europe, but quite common in some areas such as Sweden, and also now parts of the UK. The disease is only prevalent in some climatic areas, but is spreading due to climate change. Even more advanced for the time are the Hippocratic Epidemics, an ancient Greek medical annual that examines the consequences of climatic conditions on the spread of infectious diseases. So right at the start, the author here, the ancient Greek doctor, describes a disease that resembles modern-day mumps that appeared in specific climatic circumstances. As we know today, a higher incidence of mumps is associated with weather conditions. Oh, I didn't even know that, okay? While it's evident that ancient medicine lacked a lot of theory on the nature of contagion, after all, bacteria and viruses were yet to be discovered at that time, the way that cities and public buildings were planned with public health in mind, and doctors saw their patient in a broader context that took the climate into account, was surprisingly advanced. Today, ventilation is often poor in public buildings, and a risk assessment on the potential of infectious diseases are not routinely carried out. So while the underlying scientific theory may not be valid, perhaps some of these ancient measures could help us reimagine public places for the post-pandemic world. This by Rob Reddick, Commission Editor, and it's on The Conversation by Barbara Zipster, Lecturer of History, Ancient Medicine, Science and Technology, Royal Holloway, University of London. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support.